All right, so the last little bit was kind of cool, but let's talk about how you'd actually kind of refactor for real. Um, and and honestly, sometimes I think that part should have gone first, but that's fine. This is basically how to create your own methods, right? So in theory, we've done some work and we realized, boy, this code really shouldn't just be plopped in the middle of click. Maybe it's going to get used in several other spots, or maybe we just want to keep the complexity of click low and shoot off other methods from there. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our own method. And so what we do is we go outside, of course, of this method, and we create ourselves a private. There will be discussion on that later about private and public, but anyways, private. Now, when you click a button, it doesn't return anything. That's why it's void. But we do want this thing to return the future value, which is a decimal value. So we're going to go put decimal is going to be what's coming out of the function, the method, excuse me. Well, they're the same thing, but anyway, in this case. So we got the data type. Then the next thing to do is to do the name of the thing, which is going to be calculate future value. Now at this point, you know what? Let's give our neurons a break. I'm not going to pass in any arguments whatsoever, right? I'm not going to pass in any arguments whatsoever. And so at this point, it's rightfully getting a little bit mad at me because it's saying, hey, I can't. I wish I could zoom in on that, but it's basically saying at the bottom of at the far right-hand side of that error message, not all code paths return a value. Now watch what happens if I make this thing void. It doesn't have an issue because it's not returning anything, right? But as soon as I make this thing decimal, now it's going to have an issue. It's going to say, dude, you're telling me I'm going to return something, but I don't have a return statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say, how about just returning a decimal? Believe it or not, this guy is now happy as clam, except for one thing. It's not being called anywhere, right? So at least that's what I think is going on here. It's not being called anywhere. Let's actually try a build, by the way. I didn't... well, apparently he can build, he's happy as a clam there, but let's do this. Let's, I'm going to actually call it because I kind of feel cheap that I haven't called it. And instead of basically up here where the decimal future value is 0M, we're going to basically say, I tell you what, why don't you just call this value? So what's going to do is, in fact, actually, you know what I'll do is I'll do a quick breakpoint and I'll show you what it's going to do. We're going to go. And I'm going to put in the 112 and 1, hit enter or hit calculus or calculate, whatever. Okay, so I don't really care about this. So I'm going to go step one further, and now we're going to go and it's defined as variable. It's about to fly into down here. Do you see how it's down here now? It's going down here. It's going to return 0, boom. And we're back up to here and future value has now got that 0. All right, so that's pretty exciting. Let's get it a little bit cooler now. So this is a, oh boy, it had a fancy name. I know it's called a void function where it doesn't return anything, a value returning function. I whatever. Anyway, I hope that you get as convoluted as I do as you get older and you have to deal with all these different languages and the different terms. But anyway, this is, in this case, I would say this is a method that returns a decimal. So we've accomplished that. That's awesome. And we're actually using it. So that's cool too. Let me take out that breakpoint. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to actually pass something in. What am I going to pass in? Well, I'm going to pass in, it looks like I'm passing in, well, I need months. So that's one of the things that's going to come in. Oops, that was nice. Whatever just happened there. I meant to just go copy and I meant to go down here and go paste. I'm going to pass in months. I'm going to pass in a variable which is going to be called monthly investment. And I'm going to pass in a variable called monthly interest. Now, at this point, that's great. but it doesn't really know what those are. I need to define what the data types are. So this is an integer, this is a decimal, and then this is also a decimal. All right, so basically I'm passing in these parameters. Now, notice it's mad at me up here. It's basically saying, hey, you don't have an argument. So here I'm expecting nothing, but you've defined me as expecting all this stuff. So what gives? Basically up here, I have to make sure I'm passing in the variables, at least 3 variables that match. Basically, the argument up here has to match the number and the data type. So I'm passing in months. It's going to become the first argument. It's going to call it again months. I'm going to pass in monthly investment as a second, monthly interest rate as the third. All right. It really doesn't matter what I name them here. I've kept the names the same because in a minute, I'm going to take this code out of here and plop it into here. So it makes my life a lot easier if I basically keep everything the same name, right? But really the only thing that calculate future value needs is it needs to know it's getting an integer, a decimal, and another decimal. And then when I use it, I got to make sure I pass in an integer, a decimal, another decimal, and I have to make sure this thing is ready to return a value. All right, so as we go into the actual code now, I'm going to create myself another decimal, which I'm going to call confusingly future value, and assign that 0M. I'm going to actually make sure this thing returns future value. And now the part that makes the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to take this code out of here and put it into here. So notice, despite that massive lobotomy, I don't actually have any red lines because everything syntactically makes sense. What happens, this is making me feel bad here. All right, and I tell you what, let me get some air so you can see that line more clearly. So line 29, it's going to create a variable, call it future value. It's then going to go into this method, passing in these variables that have already been defined above. As it goes into here, it creates another thing called future value, which I tell you what, for giggles, did that work? What the heck is going on there? There. All right. Right. So it's going to return FV. FV is going to be stuck back into future value. Let's build it first of all. See, make sure that it didn't do anything bad, but I doubt if it did. There's no squiggles. We're going to run it and put in 100 and 12 and 1, and we're going to go calculate, and it works awesome. And again, if you actually wanted to see it run, I would probably put a little breakpoint right here, and I would run it. And put in our 100, 12, and 1. Hit the calculate button, calculate. And now I'm going to go F11, and control comes down to here, and pay attention to what's going on down here. If I go F11 again, we get an FV, and we get all these little values, and FV starts to kind of build up its value. You can kind of see it there as I'm kind of going through. And I'm going to keep going until, okay, I is 11. So now it's about, I is 12. It's about to leave. And so FV will disappear. We won't see it again. It's about to leave. Boom. And now we're back up into this method with these values. And future value is 0 right now because the assignment hasn't happened yet. When I hit the F11, future value now has its actual value. So there you go. We did that manually. There are going to be moments, I'm sure, in your life that you're going to want to create a method just to kind of block down your code. I know when I was first learning the program, before I even had the benefit of any kind of instruction, I'd create these massively long, what we would call methods now, and they became very unruly to work with. Breaking down your code into manageable methods, that makes a lot of it makes a lot of sense. It makes you a better programmer. All right, so we're done with that part, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about actually a pretty cool idea about another kind of event.